Shaktiribaruktam Bambai. That means that there is nothing that can separate you and I from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus. So this morning, we have a special guest, amen, for a testimony of her calling. This is one of the great stories of life itself, is that God arranges our life in such a way that we have the ability to give him glory in all things. I hope you believe that. I hope you believe that. The Bible teaches us that God can turn that which is bad into good. And as I'm introducing Tina Moss, who has been with our church for decades and has been a consistent blessing to almost everybody that she's ever had relationship with, her husband and her child, her son. They have been a part of the church in the past, and she was just one of the favorites of everybody because she's worked for me. She's participated in the church in many different ways. And the reason why I'm stalling a little bit is she's getting her microphone all set up for her. But my testimony is that Tina Moss has always been a pleasant person to be around. And I don't know if that's what her calling is going to be. I don't know what she's going to say about her calling. But I can tell you this, you better be ready to hear from God when Tina gets around. She's going to be talking about Jesus. There's nothing else. She is one of the great testimonies of the Lighthouse Church here in Santa Monica, and we love her very much. She's going to come now, and I think she's all, got your all thing, everything going on. Hi, Tina. God bless you. Thank you for coming.
It's very weird to be up here with two people. Oh, gosh. 3, 4. Okay. Good morning. My name is Tina Moss. I've been a part of this church for 30 years. 30 years? Wow. Yes. And I love this church. This is my home. This is really my home. This room here is my home. Why am I making a sound? Okay. Well, I got saved here in 1990. And I started working here with some absolutely wonderful people. I worked for Pastor Rob, of course, and for Denise Crawford, who was the mama that birthed this school, who was just absolutely wonderful to work for. I learned so much from her. And I worked right alongside Barbara Wainwright, who is still one of my best friends and sisters. At that time here at the church, in the school, there was Barbara Wainwright, Denise Crawford, Dave Wainwright, Gail Klein, Kathy Payton, Mike Ashcraft, Kathy Kane, Don Foreman, Mike Clayton, Sheila Cooper, Mrs. Dormy, Deborah Moini, Bridget, I couldn't remember her last name, and later on came Chris Neos. Wow. Wow, did we have fun. Oh, and Buddy, did you work here, Buddy? No, Buddy wasn't working here. It was just Brenda. Oh, yeah, you went to Africa. It was just such a great time here. Our school was so big, and we had so many wonderful people. In the church at that time, there would be standing room only. It will be that way again. Our cloud of witnesses who have gone to be with the Lord from the church that I could think of last night was my husband, Marty Moss, who got saved here like a year after I did. He's a Jewish believer. Marty Moss, Boji Klein, David Wainwright, Dr. Morrow, Kenny Winook, Roland Metler, Bill and Betty Pritchett, Dan Straub, Jesse Klein, Chris Klein. These 4 boys were in our school: Jesse Klein, Chris Jenkins, Eric Morales, and Chris Kirk. Lisa, Pastor John's wife, Debbie Catalano, Tesha Papik, and Christine Rudolph. So we know that there are a cloud of witnesses out here. I'm 75 years old. I turned 75 during this pandemic, so I didn't get to celebrate my birthday when I had big plans. I was born and raised in a small town in northern New Mexico, a little town called Tres Piedras. It was maybe population of 100 people. It was like maybe 15 miles from the border of Colorado. Beautiful, beautiful country, but not for me. I did not like being in that small town. I was one of 12 kids. 10 of us are the only ones that lived. I was the youngest girl. My first memories as a child was waking up in my grandfather's house, my grandma and grandpa's house, my dad's parents, and having my grandfather violating my little body, which was like at 3 or 4, I think. He walked, my sister had gone to bed with my grandma, and for some reason he was in bed with me, and it went on all night. He walked me home and told me that if I said anything, I must have been 4, if I said anything, no one would believe me, and they would take me away from my parents. And my father would whip me, which he did a lot of anyway. Not beaten, but just getting the foolishness out, I guess. My dad loved and respected his parents. He would go there every morning before anything and have a cup of coffee with them, which started big fights with my mom because she was left with all of the kids. After this happened, my grandfather was there and my dad was cutting his hair. And I took my mom into the bedroom and told her what had happened. And she didn't believe me. She got so mad at me. She said, if you say anything to anybody, we'll be in so much trouble. We'll lose our family. And okay. So then I can remember we had a back room that we were building onto the house. And there were those slats where you had to put in the flooring. And I was, walking on them like this. And I fell and I cried. And then my mom came in, and then I looked down, and there was blood going down my legs. And she yelled at me, look what you did to yourself. You hurt yourself. I said, no, that's from last night. Don't you say that. So she went out there, and Dad said, why is she crying? She was here walking on the boards where she wasn't supposed to, and she got hurt. So I got another whipping. Right? And my grandpa just kind of sat there like. So my grandparents had adopted my sister before me because my mom had us so close together, and when Dad was away at war, and then he came home and he impregnated my mom with me, so my grandmother wanted to help my mom, and she said, we'll take Margie. So they did, and she had everything that we didn't have. So I would love to go over to her house to play with her toys. And so, this went on with her going to bed with Grandma and me staying with Grandpa. And then I see myself as like little Emmy, who's Zach's oldest daughter. I would be everywhere, not getting any response from my dad at all. And there were rumors that my grandmother never liked my mother because she wasn't an educated woman, which the Gonzaleses were all educated people. And so I heard rumors later on that she had accused my mother of having an affair, and I was the product of that affair. We don't ever know that happened. I looked just like my dad, so. Anyway, my mom would send me to this man who owned the big sawmill in town. he had this big lemon tree, and she would send me over there to get lemons so that she could make things. And he violated me. He had a blind wife. Now that I think of it, I'm glad they're dead. He had a blind wife, and he would put money in my hands, and then I would be pleasuring him. I must have been 5 by then, and his blind wife would be sitting in front of us. And it was just like I would leave, and, still going on with my grandpa, I would leave my body. I wouldn't be in my body. My head would be someplace else. And then there was a little grocery store across the road from our house. So my mom would send me to go get things and have him put it on the bill, and she was fine with me going over there because he wouldn't say anything about how big our bill was. But he also started violating me. Now, mind you, I'm like 5, 6. Now we start school, and I'm really into my friends because there was our school was, there was first grade through 8th grade, 2 classes. 1st through 4th was in one room, and 4th through 8th was in the other room, and they were both taught by my aunts. So I was so happy to be in school, but I learned right away how to play the game. You tell them what they want to hear, you become that helper, you do everything that they want you to do. And then I started running around with the grandkids of both the men who had violated me. So they kind of left me alone. I think they were afraid that I was going to say something to their grandkids. And I figured out how I could get out of being with my grandpa is I broke all my sister had every toy possible. All our other kids, we had none. And so if I broke all her toys, my grandma didn't want me over there. So that was my savior. And I helped my mom a lot. I became that little helper, but I can probably count the number of times on both hands that my dad ever spoke to me. Then one year when we were like in 2nd grade, we came to San Diego to see my mother's parents, and I fell in love with California. I said, I am coming back to California. I told my grandpa and grandma, as soon as I'm out of high school, I'm coming to California. We went to the beach, and that was it for me. And then in 1959, when I was going into the 9th grade, we bought a house in Albuquerque, and we had decided that the rest of us, because you had to go to boarding school if you wanted to go to high school, or you rode the bus for 30 miles each way. So all the kids before me had gone to boarding school, and then they said, well, if we buy a house in Albuquerque, they can all go to public school, and Dad could come on the weekends. So that lasted about a year. I loved my high school. It was when I graduated from 8th grade, there was 5 of us. When I went into the 9th grade, there was probably 200 in the 9th grade. And it was the first year of that high school, and it was great. I became very popular because I'm very outgoing, and just had a lot of fun. It was the days of dancing, and we used to go over to the university and dance with the guys there. And then we discovered the Air Force Base, Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, and we'd go dancing there, and then they'd serve drinks there. So I figured out I'd be even a better dancer if I had a few cocktails. And so I met a couple of guys there from L.A., and they were telling me they were from Manhattan Beach, about how great Manhattan Beach and Hermosa was. And so I knew as soon as I graduated from high school, I was coming here. And so I graduated. My parents didn't even come to my graduation. I had gotten some money from one of my brothers. The next day, I bought a bus ticket to come to California, put everything in one suitcase, and here I am. I was pretty girl, so I got a lot of things that I wanted. I'm on that bus, and we are crossing over from Arizona into California, and they got on the bus and told us that President Kennedy had been shot. So I came to Hollywood. One of my friends had an apartment in Hollywood, and I moved in with her. I loved Hollywood because in those days, Hollywood was a great place to be. It wasn't like the Hollywood now. So and I got a job right away. So I would work in Hollywood during the week, and on the weekends we'd go to Manhattan Beach and Hermosa and play around. Well, at 19, I lost my virginity, but this time voluntarily, not because somebody was taking it from me. Right away, I got pregnant. And those days, you couldn't do abortions, but Earl Green, the guy who impregnated me, said, well, we have to go to Mexico. So we went down to TJ. It was really a weird experience because you at the border, they wouldn't let the guy in. You had to go in a taxi cab and lay on the floor as you were going in. And the abortionist was at the top of a dental office. And so all I remember is waking up, and over here on the wall was a picture of the Virgin Mary, right? That's what I woke up to. And because I was raised Catholic, but I didn't believe there was a God. There couldn't be a God. All through high school and all, I said, the things that have happened to me, not having my mom and dad love me, and all of the things that people did to me, there's no way there could be a God. So I didn't believe in that. And then, let's see, where was I? Then when I got pregnant, let's see. Oh, so then I ended up marrying Earl Green, the guy who impregnated me. And my parents now absolutely loved this man. He went home with me, and he asked for my dad for my hand in marriage, and he was a good guy. He loved to fish and hunt, so everything my dad did, my dad worked for the Forest Service there. So it was like now they were happy with me. And he and I both worked for North American Rockwell. It was at the time that that the aerospace and aircraft had lots of contracts. And we were both hourly employees, but because I was an executive secretary, I built up in the company, and because at that time they were window dressing with Latinas and Latinos. It was the time of the Chicano movement. So I took advantage of it. But now I'm surrounded with all these great-looking executives who are always dressed in these neat suits, and the way it does in a big company like that, you're always flirting with each other, and my husband is still an hourly person and not a very exciting person, and because I worked in HR, in customer relations, I would sometimes have to go with one of the pilots to fly an airplane I'm not going to give names because some of these people are still alive, for some of these people that were flying with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds. And, so much attention was paid to me that I cheated on my husband, and then realized that I didn't want to be married to him because he was boring. So, but in the interim, while I was working there, I had gone to beauty school. We had both gone to beauty school. And he had left North American and bought a shop in Manhattan Beach. And so I was used to working as a secretary in the daytime, doing hair at night, and still partying afterwards. Then when did I leave? Okay. So in 1969, I got a divorce and started partying big time with all these guys. And then there was a club that they used to hang out in Playa del Rey called the La Marina Inn. Well, the La Marina Inn was also a place that all the Lakers came to and the Rams came to after work, the single ones, and some married ones. They'd come there and party after work, and after the games. And so I lived with two other girls, and we used to say we would not date anybody unless they had a name, unless they were with the Lakers or the Rams, or they were in the movie industry, or they were in a big band. And so I kept up that partying, but I figured out that because when you were with these guys, these professional football players and all, and basketball players, they always, and even guys in bands, they always had groupies. And I didn't want to be a part of a groupie. So I became the girl that went out with the married guys, which was fine with me because I could send them home afterwards. I didn't have to stay involved. And plenty of them cheated on their wives. And so I was, just to back up a little, my son didn't know any part of this life that I had. And so I was talking to my brother, and I said, I want to tell Carlo before I get up there and give my testimony. And he goes, nah, I don't think you should. He shouldn't know that. Because right after, let's see, so then in 1970, with one of these married guys, I got, when I was still at North American Rockwell and I was still married, I had an IUD inserted. That was an IUD, for those of you who don't know that, that's so that you don't get pregnant. And when the doctor inserted it, he did it so hard, he perforated the wall of the uterus, so there was like a hole in the wall of my uterus about the size of a nickel, but I almost died because it traveled up to my lungs. And I'm working in HR, and they had the doctor's offices there. It was a huge company. And so the guy I was in a lot of pain, and the doctor kept saying, no, that's just because you're a baby. So the guy in X-ray said, Tina, come in, let me check that. And when they found it, it was like 2 inches from my lungs. So they had to go in, cut me up, and do major surgery to get it out. And so they said, you can get pregnant, but you'll never be able to carry a baby. So then come along, dating the married guys, I end up pregnant, and I thought, I'm not going to, we'll just abort it. And he was very happy with that happening. And so then, now I figured out, I don't want to work 8 hours a day full time. And some of my girlfriends were doing cocktails in the marina. So they said, come on, you can do cocktails 3 nights a week, and you can still do hair, and we can go out partying, and you can have plenty of time. So I did that, and I'm working at, which at that time was the Lobster House in Marina del Rey. Now it's Killer Shrimp. And I live in an apartment that's just down the street. Well, this Saturday night, and plus I also booked entertainment, because I used to hang around with musicians too. So I booked entertainment in that particular house. In those days, live entertainment was a big thing. So, seems weird talking to no one. So I this one Saturday night, and I made a lot of money because I was good to my customers, and they always wanted to come in and sit at my station. And so I have on a new pair of shoes, and my feet were hurting so bad. I couldn't wait to get home so that I could take off my shoes and just relax. And so the girls go, we used to go out and party afterwards, and they go, aren't you? There was a place that stayed open in Marina del Rey all night, and they go, don't you want to go with us? I go, no, my feet hurt too much. I just want to go home. So one of the girls gave me a ride home, and I got to my door, and I thought I heard something inside. So I get in the door, and I double bolt myself in with the chain. And when you walked in like this, and over this way was the mirror of the dressing room, and went into the bedroom, and I saw in the mirror, and I saw somebody there with a hood over his head. I went to try to run out, and he came and put a gun to my head. I didn't know what to do. He said, you come in here and you do what I want you to do, or I'll kill you. I did everything he wanted me to do, and then some, because I realized I didn't want to die. And I said, and then my girlfriend called me on the phone, and he's I'm talking to her on the phone, and he's got the gun at my head, and she said she wants to come over and talk to me. She goes, something was wrong with you tonight. I want to talk to you. And I go, no, maybe I'll meet you later. He's going, she can't come over. She can't come over. Because then he would kill us both, right? And so she said, I said to her, well, maybe I'll meet you later. And she goes, where? And I gave her the name of 2 restaurants and made it sound like one. And she got off the phone and she goes, Tina is really high or something's wrong with her. The man ended up staying there. That was 2 o'clock in the morning. He left about, I never saw his face because he kept his hood on. And he would shake me like this and he'd go, why did it have to be you? He had gone through everything in my apartment, probably while I was at work, or who knows. And he knew everything about me. He knew who I was. But he knew also that I was a good girl, because I knew everybody in Marina Del Rey. I was friends with all the sheriffs. Business people came in to see me at the places that I worked. And he goes, oh, I'm just so sad that it has to be you. And I prayed, please, I will do anything you want to. Just don't kill me. So now I know it was the grace of God, right? I told God, when I was laying there, and I said, God, if you're real, if there is a God, you're going to save me. So could I have some water, somebody? So we made an agreement that he could come back to see me if I didn't tell the police about it. Well, the minute he walked out the door, I called Suzanne and I said, Suzanne, you got to get here. She goes, something's wrong. I said, yes, you got to get here. And she had a key to my house. And so she came over, and the dressing table where I had seen him in the mirror had about this much space between it, and I was laying under there. I was so scared. We right away went to the sheriffs, which a lot of them knew me. The thing was, this man had raped and killed, he was a serial killer, he had raped and killed 2 other waitresses in the marina. They found this out because he cut himself coming through my window, because I lived on the 1st floor, and he left blood there, and it was the same blood that they had left. And then plus they got some of the semen out of me. I was fearful for the rest of my adult life till I met Marty. At that time, I had a boyfriend who used to be a football player who lived in Las Vegas. He was a debt collector for the casinos. He collected all the uncollectible debts without using muscle. So they were scared of him. When they saw Hubert Bobo walk through, they knew they were going to pay up. And so he took me to Vegas to live so he could watch over me. But Vegas was not my kind of town. It was just things that I wanted to get away from. So I came back to LA and moved back to Marina Del Rey, and always lived with families now, because that was my protection. But I could there was maybe 3 years that I didn't sleep at nighttime. I would, do drugs. I did everything. I did mescaline. I did magic mushrooms. I did psychedelics. Everything, because I was searching. I knew God had saved me now, and I was on a search. And then I started. Marty used to come in to the Lobster House with his girlfriend and sit in my station. But, he was this young kid. He's 6 years younger than me. And I'm used to running with high rollers, right? So I thought it was cute that he was always flirting with me. So when I came back from Vegas, I went to work in a real estate company. And he and his roommate came in one night, and my boss owned like 5 apartment buildings right on the sand. And so they came in to rent an apartment, and I rented them an apartment, and then he said, want to come over and party tonight? Get high? And so me and my girlfriend went over there. By this time, Marty is working at Marriott. He helped open the LAX Marriott. And so then, like I said, I always had more than one job. I was also sales repping a job where they did a fabric protector for like chairs. And so I had to we had a big conference at the LAX Marriott, and I was trying to get that account. And so, of course, the guy who owned the company was trying to convince me that we should go in and get a room after the meeting. And here's Marty walking back and forth, right? He's walking back and forth, and he knew something was going on. And so he came over and he goes, Tina, I think, when the guys in sales want to talk to you. So he got me away from that guy. So then he says to me, do you want to go after work? He says, over to my boat in Marina Del Rey and get high? And I said, sure. So I went over there, never left. And Marty, he said he was my protector. He was going to protect me. Nothing like that would ever happen to me again. And we moved to the building on Fiji Way, which his parents had his mom had died and his dad remarried, and they left an apartment there, so we moved into their apartment. And he did protect me because I just didn't have that fear anymore, but I had been on that search for something bigger than me, and never been witnessed to by a Christian. But I was into the New Age movement. I did past life regressions. I did live stream. I did, Est, and LifeSpring, that's what it was called, Est and LifeSpring. And sometimes we would have all our conferences over at the hotel, and that's how Marty knew all about them. And so I was on the vision team, both Marty and I. He just kind of followed along wherever I went, right? As long as I let him get high, I could go on my search for the self-awareness. And so there were 6 of us. No, it turned into about 9 of us, I think, that started the vision group for Agape, the Agape Church of Religious Science. And loved the church. It grew, and there was a lot of educated black people in that church. There was a lot of people in the movie industry. It was a fun place, and that's where they you're God in your own universe. There's no such thing as hell. There's no such thing as sin. It was a great place to be. Okay, so now I get pregnant, and I had already had 1 miscarriage with Marty, and I got pregnant again, and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to carry this baby through. So I said, God, if you're real, second time, if you're real, to either let me have a baby, because I had been living with people with kids, and I've always loved kids, right? If you're real, then let me get pregnant and have a baby. Well, I have my period the next month, not pregnant again, but all this time I'm suicidal because, what's there to live? It was that depression of all the things I think that had happened to me. And so, Marty's just very happy doing his sales job. I mean, he was in sales at Marriott, and he did all the teams that came in. He would book all the teams into the hotels, so he knew all of the team players, and so he was gone a lot, and then he'd go out and party with his friends. But I lived right on the water in Marina Del Rey. It was so nice, and then I find out I'm pregnant. I was feeling really sick. I go to the doctor, and he said, "You're pregnant." I said, "No, I'm not. I've had 2 periods." He said, "You're pregnant. You're about 3 months pregnant." And I went, okay. I was the happiest that I had ever been in my life. And plus, I had quit drinking like 2 years before. I'd quit drinking and doing drugs because I hated what drinking did to me towards the end, because I would become very mean, and I would have the worst hangovers, and I would feel so bad. And I didn't want to do drugs with Marty because he was in another world, you know. And so I was just so happy being pregnant. Did all the classes. I learned how, you know, was at Agape, and everybody was so happy for me. And when my son, okay, we were looking for a pediatrician for my son, and we interviewed for my kid. Right? We interviewed all over, and we got Dr. Sachs, a nice Jewish doctor, right? Older gentleman. We're so happy with him. Well, I'm living a block from where my son was born, Santa Monica Hospital. And so my two, not pediatricians, but the doctors that deliver the baby. Yes. They were both lesbians, right? And so Marty couldn't handle the birth. I was in labor for like 13 hours, and I was going to do it without any epidural, right? And Marty couldn't handle all this pain. Squeeze his hand, and he'd go. It was like he was having the baby, you know. And so the two lesbian doctors said, "Get this man out of here. He's not helping us at all," right? And so then they said, "Okay." They're going to deliver the baby, and they said, "Get this baby's pediatrician in here right away. This baby's in distress." So here I am, having the baby, and in walks Dr. Bob Hamilton, because he was on duty that night. So he touched the forceps to Carlo's head, and Carlo flew into his arms. So that was how we first met Dr. Hamilton. Well, we became very close with him, and he and Jerry, they thought we were Christians, you know, because we were such nice people. So I would go into the doctor's office, and I'd hear Jerry talking to people at the Lighthouse on the phone, and yes, we're doing that, and we're doing this. And I loved Jerry, and she loved us. And then she said, "Where do you go to church?" And I told her, and she goes, "Oh, you can't go to church there. You got to come to my church. You got to come to the Lighthouse." And so it was time for Carlo to go to school, and I said, "Dr. Hamilton, we live in Marina del Rey. He's going to have to go to school in Venice." And he goes, "Oh, no, you bring him to where my kids are going to school." So we came in here, and by this time, Agape was going to build an academy the next year, and Carlo was a very bright kid. And so we came in, and we met with, Cheryl gave us the tour, and then we met with Denise, and loved her. We just got along so well. I mean, we hit it off. And so we decided, well, we'll put Carlo in here. And at that time, Gail was doing the aftercare program. So Gail became she was like his second mom. She pulled out every one of his baby teeth, which I still have, and he says is gross. And he told Gail, he said, "Don't be putting my pillow away too far, because when Agape Academy opens up, we're out of here." And I said, "Okay." So the second week after he was in school here, he said to me, because at that time Lighthouse had two services. I would come to the 8:30 service here, and then I would go to Agape first and then come here to the 10:30. Is that right, how we had them? And so I would hear Reverend Michael would tell you, "What a beautiful soul and spirit you are. And you can have anything in this universe that you want." And I would come here, and Pastor Rob would be preaching hellfire and damnation, right? And I'm going, I don't want to be in this church. And so I would come in dressed to the T from Agape, and wore low blouses, and Kathy Kane would come over, and she'd go, "I don't think you should be wearing your blouses that low." She goes, "It's not good to do that to men." And I said, "Okay, these girls are really weird." And so then after Carlo had been here for 2 weeks, I picked him up, and I'm working for a legal firm now. And so I would work till 3 and then come and get him, or sometimes he would stay over with Gail, because he loved Gail. He'd go, "Let me stay with Gail. Let me stay with Mommy Gail." Okay. So he got in the car, and he goes, "Mom," this was a Friday, I just accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior today. And if you keep going to agape, you're going to die, go to hell, and live with the devil forever. I went, okay, because I know that out of the mouth of babes. So, and I had been having some weird, we used to have these real deep meditations at agape. And I had been having some really weird meditations. I mean, but it was the pool of the good and the bad. There was something very dark going on. So I said, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to leave agape and start going to the Lighthouse full time. Well, it was wonderful here. The next Sunday I came in and I went to the altar. Denise prayed with me. I became like, my discipler was Karen Straub, Elaine. And so I came in, I went full board. Anything you wanted me to do, I would do it. But that was part of the old tape of, being that people pleaser. And so I loved being saved, and I got baptized, and we used to try to get Marty to come to church with us, and he wouldn't because he'd sit out in the car on Wednesday nights and wait for us and get high like nobody knew, right? And David Wainwright and all those guys. And we had heard about Lighthouse before because Joe Peterson and Marty, now Marty's an independent contractor now, he's no longer working for Marriott, and they used to do business together, and Joe was always telling Marty about coming over here. And Marty's going, I don't think I want to. So then I told him, I said, Marty, there's this guy in the church who's a Jewish guy, and there's a lot of Jews in the church. And so he would come in sometimes, and when he met Pastor Harrison, they realized that they had gone to the same temple, only Harry was a little bit older than Marty. And so Harrison had always said to me, don't worry, he'll get saved. And Harrison was such a good-looking man at the time. I thought, why does this guy have to be married, right? Why do I have to be married? I've told Pam and Harry that, right? It was great being here. And so then it came, and Carlo told his dad picked him up one day, and he goes, Dad, I want to give you your Christian report card. And his dad goes, okay, remember that? He goes, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, you're a 10. He goes, son, why do you say that? And he said, well, first of all, you don't read your Bible, you don't stay home with Mama and me, and you go out on the patio and smoke those funny cigarettes, and you go see the slippers with your friends. He meant the strippers. And Marty said something just changed for him. He goes, if that's how my son sees me, and Marty and I weren't getting along at the time, I want to change. So it was time for we used to have the Jews for Jesus came in. And so I said, Marty, please come to that. And we sat right here. And Marty got it. He got it. He finally, he realized that, okay, now I get it. So when it was time they said that, if you want to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, Carlo pushed Marty's arm in the air. And he came right down here, Pastor Harry, he got saved. And oh, Lord, when he got saved, it was like he told the whole world. At that time, you had to have, if you went to a gas station, they would pump your gas, and we'd stop at the gas station on the way into work or to church, and he'd be getting them all saved, and Carlo and I would be in the back seat going down. Oh, no. And so one of my friends who worked with Marty, but I got her to come to church here, she said in these big buildings here on Wilshire, because those were some of the buildings that Marty worked on, he did the flooring and carpet for a lot of these buildings, is they'd see him coming down the hall, and they'd go, oh, come on, hide, here comes that Jesus guy. He's going to tell us all about Jesus. And so he got radically saved. Then in 1999, Carlo graduated from 8th grade here. And I decided that I wanted a house. Everybody else had a house. Even though everybody else had a house, everybody's kid came to my house because I lived in Marina del Rey on the water. And I would never allow Carlo to go to anybody's house. I was like that overprotecting mother. On Sunday when we were talking, he goes, Mom, I am so happy that we had this talk. He said, because there were times that I resented you that you didn't let me be away from you. You know, you always had to be by me. He didn't get to spend the night away from the house till he was in 9th grade. And so, but he did thank me for giving him such a good work ethic, because I was working in the office here, and I would have him in the 7th grade. But he told me, he said, Mom, that was about 5th grade. We had a bank here, and he would go over and make the deposits. And Christy Villasenor, I would have her working here in the 2nd grade, and Kiki, I would have her working here too, and the moms all say to me later, you know, that was child labor law that you did, but all of these people are professional people because they got to, you know, spend time in the office here. I loved working here. It was so wonderful. Then we buy a house in Santa Clarita in 1999. We got a nice home, and there was a Christian school there that had more to offer Carlo than Lighthouse had at the time, because Carlo was a very smart guy. And we just hit it off so well with everybody. Santa Clarita I have so many disciples in Santa Clarita. And so Cheryl Tormey, back in the day when the kids were little, she and I used to take Michael and Carlo, they were into wrestling, and we used to take them like to Long Beach to get autographs from the wrestlers, or the wrestlers would be at the Marriott, and Marty had, you know, he still had all his connections there, so they would go there to see the wrestlers. And so we go to this, Marty goes into the Christian bookstore in Santa Clarita, and we're still traveling to Santa Monica to go to church every Sunday. And Marty goes into the Christian bookstore, and he goes, I like that singer. And the lady who owned the store said, my husband sings just like him. And Marty goes, where? And she goes, at a church we meet at a school. And so we went there, and Carlo goes, Mom, look who's sitting there. And I didn't know, this just big, good-looking guy, right? And Marty whispers over to me, he goes, that's Sting, the wrestler. And so now Carlo's in heaven, because Sting, the wrestler, goes to that church, and his brother was the pastor. So we just got into that church, so many good people there. And then we said we could only come to Lighthouse for the major events because it was getting to be too much, and we had to be grounded where we lived. And so, but we came to everything. We came to every Harvester's homecoming. We came to every wedding. We came to every graduation. I came to every baby shower. So it was like we were still here. You know, when they said, who's your pastor? I'd say, Pastor Rob. You know, it was just, but anyway, so we were going to move out of the school in Santa Clarita and move to we were going to get our own church in Agua Dulce, but the city was making us put in a ramp, and Sting had gone to wrestle in Texas. And he comes back and he says, you know what? I can buy a shopping center in Texas for what they want us to pay for this ramp, and housing is so much cheaper down there. You know, we could all move there. Well, they took like 100 people with them. They all moved to Texas. They all bought homes. And so Marty and I are church hopping. Marty's not, you know, he's fine with whenever we came to Lighthouse. But I'm church shopping. So I went to the Four Square Church, and then I'm getting my facial done one day, and my facial lady, who's still one of my dear friends, said, Tina, you got to come to my church. And I said, where's your church? She goes, Woodland Hills. I go, I'm not driving to Woodland Hills. Well, I went there, and I fell in love with the church. I just kept going there. And, you know, Marty came too, and then his business partners were in that church, but it was a mega church. But I got involved right away, working with the babies, and they had a wonderful theater group there. And so the lady would bring in her baby, and it was Ariel, Pastor Trey and Ariel, and they ran the theater group there. And so I loved them and their kids. And then in 2003, Carlo graduated from high school, and he's going to college, and he got like 3 presidential scholarships to Christian colleges, so he went to Westmont. He picked Westmont, and which Marty and I loved. And by this time, 9th grade, Carlo has gotten into theater, starting in 9th grade, and we were really theater parents. We were really involved in it. And so then, same thing in college, he told us, I wanted him to be a doctor or something, and he said, nope, I'm doing a theater major. So we supported him in that totally. And then 2004, Marty and I are going, maybe we should move back to the Lighthouse. You know, this traveling back and forth to, you know, maybe we should go home. We could get now we can sell our house and we can get a nice condo there. And okay, so we're thinking, well, let's wait till Carlo's out of college because it's easier to go to Santa Barbara or Montecito from Santa Clarita than it is from Santa Monica, because you could just do the 126 right down. And so Carlo would have a play, and I would fill the place up with people from Lighthouse. They would go to Westmont, right, to see him in play. And so then 2004, Marty was getting really heavy, and it had started since we left here. I mean, Pastor Rob, Dr. Morrow, Ian Wilson, David Wainwright, Harry, they all they got him in the office one night, and they go, you're putting on too much weight, and we're going to get you together with a trainer and a doctor. And he did, and he would lose weight for a little while, and then he'd gain it right back. So he had gotten really big in Santa Clarita, and he decided to have that surgery, where they tie up anyway, so he wouldn't eat as much, I guess. But so my brother Luis, who had also come and visited and gotten saved at this church, he's the only one out of the Catholics that got saved, and loved the Lighthouse, and he would go to all the conferences with us in Tucson. And so he said, T, I want to come and be with you and Marty. I said, honey, you don't have to. The surgery's going to be only like an hour. And he goes, no, I really feel like I got to be there. So we're there, he and I, waiting, and his granddaughter were waiting in the, because he was raising her, waiting in the waiting room. And not even a half an hour later, the doctors came out, and they go, Mrs. Moss, we got to tell you something that we don't like telling anybody. And the one doctor even had tears in his eyes. He goes, we just thought something was weird, so we put a tube down in Marty, and he is his liver's totally covered with cancer. Like, I'm going, okay, this isn't real, huh? You guys are kidding, aren't you? I immediately get on the phone, try to get a hold of Pastor Rob, can't get a hold of Pastor Rob. I finally called Pam Summer, I said, I got to get a hold of Harry, got to get a hold of Dr. Bob, and it started. Marty was having prayers all over the world, right? And Harry and Dr. Bob came over that night. We were believing that Marty was going to be healed. We had him at UCLA and for 2 months. And I remember walking into the doctor's office, and he said, Mrs. Moss, and my sister-in-law was with me, you have got to get prepared because he's not going to make it. I said, you ain't God. You can't tell me that. I said, I believe that he can be healed. And he goes, oh, you're one of those. And my sister-in-law goes, yeah, she's one of those. She believes in Jesus. And she's going, Tina, you face the facts. My mother died from cancer. He's got cancer. And I'm going, Marcia, if you're not going to go along with me, then you can't be here. So he's in there for 2 months. And at the same time, Pastor Rob had to go in the hospital. I remember going from Pastor Rob's room up to Marty's room, and Marty's getting everybody on the floor saved. Everybody that would come in, he would get them saved. So then it's time for him to come home, and we believed that he had been healed. So we're coming to church here as much as we can, but we're going to Woodland Hills. And he got up to give his testimony that he had been healed in June, and July it came back. We went everywhere to, we would go to all the healing conferences. Kenneth Copeland had his in Long Beach. We went there with David Wainwright and Boji Klein. And, Marty's still, these are all his brothers. Lighthouse, there was always somebody at the hospital. Well, now they bring him to the hospital here at UCLA. And they got him hooked on Oxycontin and oxycodone. I lost my husband. I lost him. He was gone. All he cared about was that he was going to get his pills and that I wasn't going to cut it off. And then they put him in a rehab right down here. And of course, Lighthouse has just rallied around. His name is always on the board. Dr. Hamilton would go in and look at all his records. Then they put him in at St. John's, and they said, not going to make it. He's hooked on Oxycontin and oxycodone, and they would just give him that because there was so much pain for him. By this time, cancer's all over. And he had a very rare kind of cancer. It was called insulinomias, and it's cancer of the insulin cells. So they didn't know how to treat it, so they would zap him with this kind of chemo or that kind of chemo and just killed everything inside of him. So we said, okay, I'm going to move him over to Brotman Memorial. People are going, Tina, no, don't do that, because that's in Culver City, that's not a good hospital. Went over there, the doctor there said, we're going to get him off all this medication. They took him off all the Oxycontin and oxycodone. He lived for 5 months, but he got a lot of people saved. In fact, the doctors at that hospital were here for his memorial. At his memorial here, there was standing room only. People who had left the church came back and they said, Marty Moss had to die for us to come back here. I said, well, if he died for that reason, then that was, God used him. And so the doctors over there said, okay, Dr. Hamilton would go in and he would check all his records every day. Harrison was always over there. A lot of the pastors were always over there. Any pastor that came into town, they would come over and see Marty. And so I took a leave from my work. At that time, I was working for a healthcare company in Santa Clarita. And when I got that job, I thought, why am I working here, selling adult diapers and trachs and stuff? But God knew why he put me there, because there was a time when I had to change my husband's diaper. I learned a lot about medicine so that I knew what to ask at the hospital. But at the hospital, I treated the nurses. I would bring them, Adrian Kinsella would make baked goods for me. I'd bring them to everybody on the floor. She would make scarves for me. I'd bring it for them. I had a big jar of candy in his room. I would be here by 10 o'clock in the morning and stay until 9 o'clock at night, and then Pastor Green and his wife would come in, and Daryl. Daryl stayed with him every night for 5 months. And as Daryl says, Marty taught me about, he said he taught me about life, but he also taught me how to die. And Marty and Daryl would tell every nurse that came in there about Jesus. So then when Marty passed away, the fear that I used to have because of that rape and that man breaking in my house. I'm living by myself in this 3-bedroom house. Carlo's already living in Hollywood. And, excuse me. I used to go in my bedroom. I had my dog. And because I worked so much, I didn't get to know my neighbors. But Marty did, because he wouldn't go to work till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or he worked a lot from home. And so one time when Marty had fallen down, one of our neighbors came over to help me because I couldn't pick him up by myself because he would lose. That's why when he was in the hospital, he would lose the strength in his legs. So when he was in the hospital at Brotman, he couldn't walk for that 5 months. he just lost his ability to walk. And so this guy came over to help me, and he said, if you need me for anything, call me. Well, then when Marty quit walking the night before I brought him here to Santa Monica, he fell down, and I called Carlo, and I said, Carlo, I can't pick your dad up. He goes, Mom, before I get there from Hollywood, you can get the fire department over there. Call him over there. It took 4 guys to get him back up on the bed, and then, we brought him we brought him to Santa Monica in the ambulance. And so they're trying to get him down in a wheelchair from downstairs, and this one paramedic goes, this guy's too heavy. I can't do him. I just hurt my back. I go, dude, why are you doing the job you're doing if you just hurt your back? Get out of here. My dog bit him. I was so happy. So anyway, when we got over here, I lost my train of thought. So the fear came back. I would lock myself in my bedroom and put the dresser up against the door till it was time to get up the next morning. And I was just, I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't go back to Shield. And I would just be walking around with I'd stayed close to all the people here at Lighthouse. I would come here on Sundays. And then one day I was walking out by the pool, and one of the neighbors was there, and he had something on his face, and I said, am I going too long? And he said, I said, what do you have on your face? And he goes, they just operated on cancer. And I go, and start crying. My husband just died from cancer. And he goes, sweetie, would you like to go to a Bible study with my wife tonight? I go, yes. So she was John MacArthur's assistant. So I started in the women's Bible study. It was great, but they're all cowgirls. They all have horses, right? So they go, Tina, you've got to get out of the house. And I go, I didn't want to. And so they said, look, our ranch was across the road. Just come over and clean up our horses, brush them. I go, have you seen me? I'm a girly girl. I'm not a cowgirl, right? And they go, just do it. Well, that was so good for me. Now, these are all Christian women, right? On fire for God. And so the lady who owned the ranch said to me, I just acquired my granddaughter. And she was an administrator at a hospital. Could you take care of my granddaughter? Because, and so it was time for me to leave Shield Healthcare. And I walked in and saw Lily, and she said, Nana, and that was it. I worked at the ranch for a couple more years, all the time coming here, and Pastor Rob's going, you got to sell your house and move back here. But I couldn't leave Lily, so I stayed there for Marty died in 2008. I moved back here in 2014. I sold my house in 2012. But then, so the lady from John MacArthur's church, she said, you cannot live alone. I've got a couple of nurses that should rent your rooms. It was wonderful. I had these wonderful girls from the church that stayed there. And then all this time, Pastor Trey and Ariel, who are with Eastern Sky Theater Company, are, they've kind of taken me under their wing, and they would come over for barbecues, and my house became like that house of where, because I'm going to another church now down closer to my house and coming here, so I'm doing 2 churches. And they would all come over to my house and have barbecues, and I became part of that theater company. After I had seen their play 17 times, they said, could we come over for a barbecue tonight? And I go, yeah. And they said, would you like to be on our board of directors? Because we know you like it so much. So I became part of that theater group, which, they've been here a lot. Pastor Trey has preached from here. They absolutely love Pastor Rob and Pastor Harry and everybody here. And Judy, they love Judy. And so I moved back here, and a brother here in the church had offered me a job. Well, Pastor Rob right away got me a place to live. And one of the girls I was going to move into the apartment where Becca and Adam were living, and because one of the girls from the church was moving out. And then Tony said he wanted to talk to me one night, and he goes, I want you to move into my old apartment that I'm leaving. He said, I know you're going to really like that place. Well, you know, so many people had offered Tony big money for that place, and he let me have it. And he said, God told him that was mine. Since then, Tony has become like my second son. This man is unbelievable. He is so good to me. And then after his mom died, I decided that I was going to be his mom. So, and everybody in the building thinks that he's my nephew, because that's how we did it. He said, my aunt's moving in here. The brother who had offered me the job said, oh, I didn't mean right now. I went, okay, I just left a nice, cushy little place in Santa Clarita and had enough money to rent my place, and I'm not going to have a job. Okay, God, you said. And I would do this to God all the time. When I was driving home from the hospital, I would remind him, I'd say, God, you said. I would remind him of all his promises, which I had a lot of them in here, and I haven't used any of them. You said that I would not fear. You know, you said that you would supply all my needs according to your riches and glories in Christ Jesus. And so I was walking outside with my dog, and I met this good-looking man with his baby. And I tell the little boy the story, and he goes, was that baby me? I go, yes. And so we started talking. I said, do you have a babysitter? And he goes, no. And I said, well, I babysit. And he goes, I said, who's your pediatrician? He said, Bob Hamilton. I said, he's my best friend, so I got hired right away. And through them, they introduced me to their other friends. But I'm still needing, but during this whole time, I'm volunteering here. So please, if you don't have any work, come and volunteer here. It's such a blessing. I was volunteering here, and after school, I was teaching a little theater class to the kids here, and it was great. It was great. I was here with Patty and Dickie, who just took me under their wing also when I moved back. I miss them so much. I love them so much. And so when I worked here before, Pastor Rob and Denise trusted me to do anything. I'd go, I want to do a cookbook. Okay. I want to do a phone book. Okay. I want to do this fundraiser. Okay. He trusted me to do anything I could do, but I always followed through and made sure we made money for the school. And so anyway, so I got a job working there, and then one night I'm sitting here in church, and there's this pretty lady, and I said, hi, how are you? She goes, fine. I'm from New York. I'm just here visiting. Tony Marino told me about the church, and she said, I'm visiting my daughter. I said, oh, where does she live? She goes, 15th in Idaho. I said, I'll give you a ride home, because I like to talk to all the new people, right? So I gave her a ride home, and I told her what I did, and she goes, oh, my daughter just lost her nannies. Maybe you want a nanny for her? I go, no, she told me how old the kids were. I go, I like babies. So she called me the next day, and she goes, my daughter's got a red carpet affair, and, we'll pay you $100 a night if you just come and take care of the baby. Well, Dooney and I fell in love. So now I've got all these jobs in the church, and I can't volunteer anymore. Right? And so God has blessed me. I have 5 families that I work for. None of them are saved. They're all Democrats. They know I'm a staunch Republican. They know I'm a Trumper. They know I'm a on-fire, born-again Christian, and I'll pray for the kids and teach the kids about Jesus, and they'll ask me for prayer. They know Pastor Rob, of course, because everybody knows who Pastor Rob is. And so God is good, and then Karina, she said, Tina, you've got to rent your room out to international students. So I had international students who, for Mother's Day, they all called me. It was wonderful. They all loved the church. God just sent me the Christian students. God is good. Now I'm back to being in fear of being locked in. I don't like being locked in. I don't like wearing a mask because it reminds me of him having his hand over my face. I don't. I'm I don't think that we should not be able to have church. Anyway, I know I've talked too long, but for the record, I've talked too long. What do you think my calling is? Children. That's my calling.